All right, we're very happy to have my next guest live for the remainder of the show. We have a lot to run through with him. His new book is titled Let Me Finish, and it's in bookstores everywhere. Governor Christie, thank you so much for being here. Congrats. Thanks. On the new book. You've been on every show except like Farm Tools Weekly. I mean, what is this? Like, what are we here? That's all right. All right, because I got some questions. You haven't
I can't believe I'm not on Farm Tools Weekly. How did I miss that?
Get that PR person on it, Chris.
Let's go. Move.
All right. Well, I want to start with something you said on Colbert last night. See, if you don't come on my show first, I'm going to have to be really mean to you.
That's right.
No, I'm just teasing. So let's take a look.
Do you regret? Getting Donald Trump helping get elected?
I made a decision at the time that I thought he was going to win the nomination after I dropped out, and that I preferred him to Hillary Clinton, and that's why I made the decision. It wasn't a whole lot more complicated than that, and I still agree with what his policies are more than I agree with Hillary Clinton's. Listen, he has turned the Republican Party into something different than it was when I started to run for president.
Now, would you consider that something different good or bad, ultimately, for the GOP, Governor?
In some ways good and in some ways bad, from my perspective. You know, in the good ways that he's turned it, I think his toughness on China has been something that the party needed for quite some time. And I think his continued efforts in that regard, his continued efforts in trade in general, I think are good. And he's gotten a much better deal with Canada and Mexico than we had before. And I think he'll achieve the same things with the EU and with Japan. I think he's been better for us in terms of our regulatory policy and has put much more of a focus than we were putting on when we controlled Congress, and could have done more there, too, on regulatory issues. Now, in the places where I disagree, I think there are times in foreign policy where he acts impulsively. You know, whether it's some discussions about Syria and the cross currents that involve there. I think he should take a more deliberative approach. I think he is now taking a more deliberative approach. But listen, in the main, I would say he's made the party better because he won. He beat Hillary Clinton.
Okay, yeah. I mean, do you think, you know, I've been a big fan of yours for a long time. Everyone who's listened to my interviews with you on the radio, you know that. But do you think you could have beaten Hillary Clinton in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, all those states?
Yes. I absolutely do. Sure, I absolutely do.
Because of your positions on trade,
listen,
immigration, the things that motivated those voters to turn out. And obviously he had the money raised,
too. Yeah, there's no question that I think that Hillary Clinton was an extraordinarily flawed candidate, and she needed someone who was going to be direct and go at her and call her out on all of the things that she had done as Secretary of State and the things she was proposing and how preposterous they were. The way we would lose to Hillary Clinton is if we had a candidate who was not direct, who was not blunt, who was part of the old guard, whether that was a Jeb Bush or a Marco Rubio or a Scott Walker. I don't know that those guys would have been able to pull it off because they would have been more PC. I don't think you needed a PC person.
Well, they weren't in tune to the party. I mean, I'm getting you caught in a prosecutorial trap and you don't even know it. That's why I love having you on. You're tired. You've done a lot. I'm just
Look at you.
Okay. All right. So, look, I asked you whether the party went into a good or bad direction, and you said the old guard wouldn't have beaten Hillary, and you're absolutely right. They would have gotten Florida. They couldn't win their home state, Governor. They couldn't win Florida. They couldn't win, you know, their key states. Mitt Romney couldn't win Michigan against, when he was up against Obama. So they couldn't win. So the new guy comes in and says, look, I think all your policies have been wrong on trade. He thinks the foreign policy had been too interventionist in Iraq and in other parts of the Middle East. We've upset the apple cart there. And I think the people, that really got their attention because people are very war weary. Whether it's Syria or they're very war weary. Well, we got 2,000 troops in Syria. Everyone wants to knock the crap out of ISIS, and Trump's like, well, okay, well, why exactly are our guys still getting killed there? And I think ultimately, you know, he's probably going to be more cautious. But the party's turn was in the right direction under Trump, and I think you were closer to that than those other guys.
And that's what I said. I said in the main, I think it was important because the biggest thing he did was win. And on those areas in foreign policy where I've disagreed with him at times, and I maybe have a more aggressive, more interventionist policy than he would have, I don't think that would have determined a loss in the election to me when contrasted up against Hillary Clinton with all the other advantages. But in the end, it doesn't matter. He was the nominee. I was the first person to go out and support him. You were telling me I should do that, and I went out and I did it. And I think, that represented a big moment in the campaign when someone who had been seen at least as part of the mainstream, because I was a governor, even though a very different kind of governor in a blue state, I think that was a big turning point in the primary campaign, which I believed he was going to win, and even more important for the general election.
Well, and we're going to get into more of what might be in your future down the road. But I want to play something from today, or yesterday maybe. This is Chuck Schumer talking about these border negotiations that are ongoing, perhaps to avert another government shutdown. Let's watch.
We've come to big agreements before, for example, on budgets and Russian sanctions. What was the common theme? When the president stays out of the negotiations, we almost always succeed. When he mixes in, it's a formula for failure. So I'd ask President Trump, let Congress deal with it on its own.
What about Schumer, your old nemesis?
Hey, now listen, the reason he doesn't want Donald Trump involved is because he wants to try to roll over congressional Republicans. And I just think the idea, I used to have a saying in Trenton that there were only 3 important numbers in Trenton: 41, 21, and 1. 41 votes you needed in the lower house to pass the bill, 21 in the upper house, and 1, which was the signature of the governor. It's the same thing with different numbers in the Congress. And if you don't have the president involved, you're not going to come to a solution. And so the idea that he wants to keep the president out, I think, is very Machiavellian on his part. He doesn't want the toughest guy in the room at the table, and he wants to try to roll some people. And quite frankly, I think the president has to be involved. Any negotiation without the president is doomed for failure because he won't agree.
Right. I mean, I just thought it was just ludicrous. But
yeah.
When someone has their glasses down on their nose, they are a lot more credible and believable. So I stop and listen. All right, back with me now is Christie. I want to start with your appearance on Colbert again last night and an interesting comment you made on your book tour. Let's watch.
I'll join you on this one. Now,
yeah, good question. Here we go.
Would you have been a better president than Trump?
Yes.
I like that.
Okay, so a lot of modesty, a lot of tequila. I like it. Obviously, some fun with Colbert last night.
Yeah.
But what does Trump need to do to win in 2020? And are the Democrats? I started the show by talking about the lurch to the left of the Democrat Party, infanticide, green energy, all that. Are the left actually helping Trump now? As we move into the election cycle?
They're significantly helping him by continuing to move to the left, by putting people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez out in front and being a spokeswoman for the party, talking about a 70% tax rate, talking Kamala Harris, talking about eliminating all health insurance companies and having insurance for all. And let's not forget our friend Howard Schultz. I'm going to get a T-shirt made up that says "Run, Howard, Run." Let's go, Howard. Get in there. Run as an independent. All of those things are process things that are helping to shape the landscape to make the contrast even better. What you want in an election politically is a great contrast. You had a great contrast between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. That's what we want again. We don't want people to muddle things up in the middle. We want contrast. Do you want a socialist society or do you want a capitalistic society? Do you want a society that respects life or do you want a society that denigrates life? Do you want a society that gives opportunity for everybody or where government controls everything? Donald Trump has to be able to draw that picture very starkly and clearly. The Democrats doing what they're doing are going to help him. He needs to get better people around him, Laura. So many of the mistakes in the first 2 years of this administration, and I write about this in the book, have been unforced errors, unnecessary errors by people who don't have the experience in Washington, D.C. It's great to be a disruptor. I was a disruptor in Trenton. I would have disrupted in Washington. But I also need to have people around me, and he needs to have people around him, me as a former prosecutor, him as a businessman, that understands the politics of the Capitol. And it helps to avoid some of those unforced errors like government shutdown.
Yeah, Chris, I think, I'm sorry, I should call you governor, even though you're my friend, but governor, I think that you are making the case for you to be the chief of staff. Now, I know everybody knows I pushed for you to be chief of staff. I talked about it on radio, tweeted about it. And I know I'm not getting into Kushner or the dad, or, I mean, I think that's all pointless to talk about. And everyone's hit that to death, and I think it's boring for my viewers. My viewers want to know, Chris Christie is no nonsense. You've known Trump for all these years. You have a good managerial sense. You are no nonsense, and you can take criticism, because I've seen you take criticism, because I've given it to you, and you actually listen to people. Would you consider going into the White House as a chief of staff, or even managing the 2020 re-election campaign for this president?
And I've always told the president that whenever he calls, I will answer the phone and I will listen to what he has to offer. And I always have. And I always will, for two reasons. One, because I love my country. And I can't imagine a country governed by the liberal Democrats that are out there running. And two, he's my friend, and I'm loyal to my friends.
And even though, as you've recounted, you don't feel like he was loyal to you?
No, he wasn't. And the fact is...
And that's in the book, and I've read it all. And it's a lesson in humility, though. And you're a big personality, but you had to humble yourself. We all have gone through those moments. And the book
that's in the book. That's right. And the book talks about the ups and downs of my life. And when you get knocked down, it's about getting up and fighting for the things that you believe in your heart, whether it's your family, whether it's a cause that you believe in, a philanthropic cause, or whether it's your country. And all those things are things worth fighting for, and it's never a straight line up, Laura. Yeah. And it hasn't been for me, but you know me, right? And you're not for you. And for us, we're fighters. And I'm going to fight, and if the president asks me to fight for him, I will always listen to a request to fight for my president and my country.
Did the book get in the way of you becoming chief of staff? I mean, that would have been kind of awkward if the book were coming out.
No, because if I had accepted chief of staff at that time, the book would not have come out.
Okay.
And that was part of the deal.
All right, Governor, I want to talk about a report that bubbled up in the Wall Street Journal. I know you saw it, that the White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, was cutting some secret deal with the Democrats that would have ensured that they would have gotten a liberal pick as a compromise on the Ninth Circuit. Well, we learned today, and I learned today, that this was all complete, bull, what.
Yeah.
And tonight it was confirmed that the president announced his intention to nominate these stars to the Ninth Circuit: Daniel Collins, Daniel Bress, and Kenneth Lee, two of them Scalia clerks, all phenomenal. Governor, explain, why is it so important that the president has really done well on judges? You didn't tick that off earlier. Why is it so important that this Ninth Circuit is not allowed to become a runaway injunction train that's going to run over the president's policies?
Well, that's what it is right now, Laura. It is a runaway injunction train, and everybody runs to the Ninth Circuit and the lower district courts in the Ninth Circuit to challenge the president's actions, because they know that the Ninth Circuit is the most activist, ultra-liberal of all of our circuits. And that's why these nominations are so important. Donald Trump promised to transform the federal courts, and he has done great work at the Supreme Court and at the circuit courts, but he has not been able to yet crack the code in the Ninth Circuit. He goes in with Lindsey Graham, pushes these nominations through and fights it. It's going to make a big difference for the last 2 years.
All right, Governor, congrats on the book. We really appreciate you spending some time. Good luck on Farm Tools Weekly. They just texted. They're booking you for tomorrow.
I'm rushing there right now. I want to pre-tape.
Thanks so much.
Pre-tape.